Welcome to The Joy Factor. Now, here's your host, Julie Hansen.
All right, welcome to the Joy Factor podcast. I'm so happy to be here with Bethany Perry, who we're going to be continuing our conversation about the amazing power of Brainspotting. So welcome to the show, Bethany.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, Julie.
Wonderful. Why don't we just start right off and tell us a little bit about how you became a Brainspotting practitioner. What was the story behind that?
Yeah, so truthfully, I didn't know anything about Brainspotting. I'd never heard of it, but I had several clients, probably a handful that were at one time that were suffering from severe anxiety. And when they had, even though they had come a really long way in their healing process, they were at an impasse. One in particular, she was like, I did not know how to help her. And my heart, was so large for my clients, and I was looking to refer her for some EMDR. I reached out to Amen Clinics. I'm affiliated with Amen Clinics, and so I reached out to my contact in Chicago, and his name happens to be Kevin, and I'm like, Kevin, where can I learn EMDR ASAP, and do you recommend someone in Michigan? Told him the story of this client, and he said, I have some recommendations. However, you might want to check out Brainspotting first. So I did as soon as we hung up. And what I discovered was amazing. And I immediately wrote a letter to Dr. Grand, and we communicated with, I think he responded in less than 24 hours. And probably 4 weeks later, I was in Tennessee studying my first Brainspotting. So, and it's just been uphill from there. Not only the results I've received personally, but the results that my clients have gotten, the relief that they've gotten, the newness in their life, especially here, helping understand that joy can truly be found and discovered, even in the midst of all the other stuff that's going on.
Beautiful. And for people which is probably a good percentage of our listeners that have no idea what Brainspotting is, how do you describe that? And I love to ask practitioners this, like, how do you explain this?
Yeah, so it's a tough thing to explain. And I'm kind of I've been changing how I explain it, depending, quite honestly, who I'm speaking to. For anybody out there who is a yogi, or really they know how, or meditator, they know how to connect to their body. It's a brain-body connection. There's somatics involved. The other way I love to think about it, and so I'm sort of trying to blend the two, so one definition fits all, is when you think about the fetus in utero, at about 4 weeks, the brainstem begins to grow, and then from the brainstem comes the lower or midbrain, and from that midbrain, at the same time at 4 weeks, that connection from the same cells, the eyes, the ocular nerves are created. So when you hear about Brainspotting, one famous phrase is "where you look matters." What happens is, from 4 weeks in gestation, our eyes begin to connect to our body. So when we work with Brainspotting, whatever it is, whether it's expansion or whether it's something that we want to we want to reduce, we want to release, it's taking our eyes and finding that spot that particular day, because there's millions of them, and allowing the brain to be the computer, connecting to the body, feeling what we feel in our body, giving just permission to feel. And then the brain is brilliant and has a way of helping you release all the tension or anxiety or emotion that is stored and often stuck in the body. And then we get to find the freedom and joy that we are looking for.
So tell us about, how have you personally found relief? And how do you know that this works?
Yeah, it's so interesting because, I didn't until my first brain spotting weekend. It was when we were able to meet in person, and I volunteered to be. So just to let your listeners know, when you go to get trained, you are shown how to do a different type of brain spotting, and then we talk about it. We talk about it technically. We talk about it with a person who was, the brain spotty, so to speak. And I volunteered, and I got chosen. I was the first one, and it was so fascinating. I chose something that I thought would not lead me to something really big because there were about 50 to 70 people witnessing. And I didn't really want to get to, one of my younger brothers passed away, and it's still pretty, it's a big emotional thing. So I brought up something that was larger, but I didn't think my brother would come up, but he did anyway. And honestly, even that all by itself was such a gift because of recognizing that every time we have a thought, chemicals are created, and that thought and those chemicals connect to the same like, which is why I tell people that often brain spots in our bodies are like rubber band balls, and we might get 2 or 3 rubber bands off the ball, and there might be another spot that connects to the same one. Maybe not. But eventually the goal is just to have a bunch of rubber bands that we can just kind of flick off for fun, right? Not hurt anybody, of course, but so that we can not be all balled up inside and find a space of, less judgment for ourselves, more love for ourselves, which then creates that room to be the person that we want to be.
Beautiful. I love it. And I love how you were also highlighting just it's such a unique experience.
Yeah. It's difficult to describe because when you tell someone, well, we found it where I felt it in my body, and then we found where I call it a magic wand, where the wand goes, and we look at the tip, and then we just go in, right, as much as possible. And the practitioner is pretty silent for the most part and holds space for us. And often I think that witnessing the holding space is what's so powerful, because when we're in our most weakest and vulnerable places within, we often don't feel safe enough to go there on our own, even when we want to. And when we have someone with us and they're not judging it, they're just there holding that container, it is truly an amazing gift. It's a piece of brain spotting that I think really without experiencing it, you can't understand it totally. Anyway.
I agree with you. For those listeners who are interested and wondering what would I expect? Like, tell us about, how long are the brain spotting sessions? How many would you expect to experience before you might notice a shift happening? Just a little bit to kind of help people understand this is what you'd be kind of signing up for.
Okay. So, truthfully, it's different for everyone, right? So some people, one session, and I find with clients that if the younger, like teenagers, tend to need fewer sessions than an adult, but that makes sense. Somebody who's 60 versus somebody who's 13 has a lot bigger rubber band ball, so to speak, right? We've had more things, more big traumas that have happened in our life. But everyone is different, how their body responds to letting go. But I can tell you that everyone will, whether they know it or not, one session all by itself, they will receive results. There's no way that brain spotting doesn't work. And I know that sounds a little bit maybe pompous or pious, but it's the way our brains are wired. So it has to do with the wiring. It's science, and how much that impacts you, I don't know. Typically, when a client comes to me and we really don't have a good feel, I start with 5 sessions, because when I work with clients, I often work with them for 6 month or a 12-month program where we include a lot of things to work in helping them to have the life that they want. When it's solely brain spotting, someone comes to me, the last thing I want to do is say, oh, sign up for 10 sessions and they need 3. That can be intimidating, and they can worry about, am I going to get my money back? And the answer would always be, of course, yes. But 5 is a good number to start with, I find. And sometimes that's been enough, and sometimes it hasn't. A lot depends on if we're working with capital T traumas or we're working with lower T traumas. It really depends on what it is for the individual.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would definitely add on that the pandemic is doing a number on all of our brains.
Oh, we are all. Dr. David Grant coined this phrase, existential trauma. Mm-hmm. We are all in trauma right now. Everyone. I believe that, like, if you open Facebook, if you happen to be on it, and there's this polarization, you turn on the news, there's this polarization that's happening. And even though it was happening before the pandemic, I think the trauma from the pandemic has only heightened that. Mm-hmm. And it's sad for all of us, no matter where you are on the spectrum of feelings or thoughts or emotions. I don't think anybody's having a good time with what's happening. It's why their feelings are so strong, because we want to, our base, our foundation is protecting ourselves and those that we love. And when we go into protection mode, we're in a trauma mode. We're in that fight or flight mode. It's not a really great place to be, particularly for a long time.
No, and I think, the solace in all of that is that, our brains are kind of magical, right? Like, you're talking about a magic wand, but that our brain has the capacity to rise to some of these challenges if it's given a little bit of support, a little bit of guidance and space to do it. And all of that might continue to sound confusing to someone who's never experienced brain spotting.
Yes, it might. It might. But I highly recommend it. And I think the other thing is, particularly with my clients, a lot of people will think, well, I didn't go to war, or I wasn't abused, I wasn't raped, I wasn't human trafficked, I don't have the traumas that would, be sufficient for something like that. The truth is, everyone that's a human being has experienced trauma, period. And it may be little to you, it may be little to someone else and be big to you. And we may just be not comfortable sharing that it really is super big. Mm-hmm. And so brain spotting can help everyone.
I agree.
By far the most powerful method, and I use a lot of different methods in my coaching practice and actually created a coaching course. And before I discovered brain spotting. And now anyone who goes through my course who has a master's degree, they must add brain spotting to their practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like there's a before and an after, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It changes us so profoundly and so rapidly. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not years and years.
No, and sometimes that's subtle, right? Like, it's not.
Mostly, I think that's what I love about it. It's not. Mm-hmm. It's gentle. It's loving. It's kind, and the hour. I think you asked me that question. I didn't answer. Sorry. 50 to 60 minutes is usually how long a session is. I would say sometimes I have a client who might need less, might be 30 minutes, or that's what they want, and that's okay. It's certainly doable, but I would say anticipate about 50 minutes per session. More than that can get a little bit intense. Mm-hmm. But in that time frame, what happens is it continues to work because the brain doesn't stop working on that healing. So the healing begins in the session, but it doesn't end there.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it really is. Well, and I think that if we think about trauma and we think about what all humans need at a base level, it is to belong. right? Like a sense of belonging.
It's a basic need.
Mm-hmm. And I think brain spotting, it brings us home to ourselves,
That's a beautiful way. Yes, I do.
So it is a beautiful thing, and it's hopeful, and it's, everything, there's lots of different ways to kind of get at these same states, but it's really important to highlight the ones that we know can help keep us in line with being able to reach for whatever is bringing us joy. And so I want to ask you to tell us about your joy factor. What does that mean to you?
So there's so many things it means, quite honestly, because I love the word joy, period. And I think my joy factor, what it means to me is where do I find joy? How can I wake up every morning and discover, what brings me joy? What can I create that's going to bring me joy? And my personal joy factor, like a practice that I love to even offer to my clients, and it's one I practice daily, is when you're in that first wake up place, unless there's someone who just jumps up and gets out of bed, before I even open my eyes, my goal is to think of 5 to 10 things I'm grateful for, because gratitude brings joy. And I work on bringing in new things, but one thing that never changes for me is my family, my children and my grandchildren. My kids know, like, oh, you're just here to see the littles. That's what I call them. You're not really here to see me, which isn't true, but sort of is true sometimes. Those grandbabies are pretty special. But truthfully, I believe that we can find joy everywhere we look, because when we're looking for something, we tend to find it. And if we're looking for joy, then we'll discover joy.
That's a really beautiful way to put it, Bethany. If we've got somebody who is likely listening who says, well, yeah, that's true for everybody else, what would be and I'm, always want to ask, like, the tiniest little step or strategy that you would put out there for someone that just feels like, hopeless, alone, is not able to think about joy in that way?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I would want them to think is that there's someone in this world, and that person is me, and I'm sure it would be you and many others, but I'm speaking to whoever's listening, that first I want to just wrap my arms around you and say, you can know that you're loved. And even if you don't right now, there are 4 questions, and this is a blend of something I learned from Dr. Amen and Katie Byron. 4 questions to ask yourself when I that's good for you, I can't find joy. So let's just take the statement, I can't find joy. And first ask yourself a question, is it true? Is it true that you can't find joy? And there's no judgment what your answer is. Whatever the truth is what it is. And then the second question, when you get your yes or no, is it really true? It might be yes and no, no and yes, 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 no. It doesn't matter. And then once you receive that, allow your body to feel as while you're answering. The third question is, who would I be without that thought? And then really ponder, who would I be if that thought didn't exist? Maybe that thought is a good thing, because maybe it motivates you to do something that you really want to do. Maybe that thought could be better served if we reframe it, if we change it. And whatever the answer to that question is, the last question is, how can I reframe it? So as an example, if someone says, I often work with people who struggle with weight loss, is, I'm fat. It's just an easy one, right? I'm fat. Is it true? Yes, I'm overweight. Is it really true? Yes, I'm overweight. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's someone who's anorexic, but let's just pretend. And then who would I be without that thought? Well, I'd be a lot less anxious, probably might not do so much nighttime eating. So we'll just finish with, how to reframe it. And the fat, and it's not very nice to tell yourself you're fat ever, just so you know. But how many Americans do all the time, right? So it's an easy one for people to relate to. And then who would I be without that thought? Whatever your answer is, whether you need that thought or don't need that thought, how can I reframe it so that it speaks to the fact that I can still have joy? So I can still be loved. I'm lovable just as I am. One of my favorite quotes, one of them, I have many, is we cannot hate ourselves into a version of ourselves we love. So when we are beating ourselves up with I'm fat, I'm fat, I'm fat, sooner or later, the incongruency between the subconscious and the conscious, there must be congruency. So our body decides to do what we're telling it. And so by reframing, if you are telling yourself I'm fat and then you say I'm not fat, it's like two ships passing, right? That usually doesn't work. We want to find something that speaks to the left brain that never stops talking, that comes from our heart and soul. So I look at it as a mother speaking to their teenager, or a father speaking to their teenager, right? And you get to be the one who shouts back instead of the teenager. And instead of saying I'm fat, is like I am doing my best to make healthy choices every day. So we stop shooting on ourselves, we stop blaming ourselves, and then when we say I'm doing my best, there's an automatic sigh, relief. And so that is something I pretty much teach all of my clients in our first session.
That's wonderful. Well, and it's putting your imagination to great use, right? Who would I be without this thought?
Yeah, that's from Katie Byron. It is. And you usually have to think about it for a minute. It's not usually something that comes quickly.
That's great.
That's
wonderful.
Good.
All right. Any other sources of inspiration for you, or just generally speaking, kind of looking at what happens to steal your joy, and then what do you reach for to get it back?
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that steal our joy, right? In everyday life, regardless of what's going on in our life. Maybe it's something that we would consider little, that, I didn't get enough sleep last night, or my computer and I are having a bad day. We may think that those are little things, but they do add up, right? And I can say that my computer and I don't always, see eye to eye some days. And then there might be big things. Like today, COVID is I'm just ready to explode out of my skin because of what's going on due to COVID, or what's going on in my family due to COVID. I can't go see my grandchildren like I like, all of those things. So what I do is, because COVID has been the hardest in the family piece for me. So I had to really do some digging to get out of the ditch, so to speak. I always recommend meditation, breath work, yoga, Tai Chi. If you don't love yoga, finding some kind of movement that you love that can release and also bring peace. Speaking to like-minded friends, just having a conversation with someone who just goes, oh, yeah, somebody who agrees with me, who gets it. There's also there's two different meditations that I have recorded, and one actually I'm going to offer everyone for free. It's a meditation called Moving from Fear to Love. It's typically when I'm having a little trauma with my computer, which appears to be little, but in the moment, it may not feel so little. What's underneath it, the frustration, the anger, whatever, what's underneath it really is a feeling of inadequacy, or a feeling of fear that I'm inadequate. And when we get to the root, and usually fear is there, and we look at it in a guided way, we're able to move out of it and discover how we can replace that with love, so that we can come back to the computer and say, you know what, I'm really so thankful. I really love this computer. I mean, that's a little thing. Something big, like I just got in a huge argument with a family member because we have not been out of the same room for 24/7 for however many months, right? It might be a little bit different process, but it still will work, and it really will help the body calm down.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you for, again, mentioning that piece about the body, right? We really do need to recognize that the mind-body-heart connection is real, and that we do have these resources that we can begin to channel. And let's talk about how can our listeners get a hold of that guided meditation.
Yeah. So it's Bethany Perry. So BethanyPerry.com. That is my website. It is being completely redone right now. /release-fear. So you want to release fear, receive love, receive healing. But that's the page where you'll be able to access that meditation, and then it's yours. And you can reach me on my website at BethanyPerry.com. My email is life@BethanyPerry.com. Feel free to email me.
Tell us about how to get a hold of you and anything else you want to share.
I offer a free consult to everyone who could sign up for it on my calendar on my website. Now, once in a while, my calendar is not updated, so I may have to change that. I just want to put that out there. But if that's the case, I'd just reach out to you. And we can meet online on Zoom. I meet with people around the world. I've been using Zoom a lot longer than COVID. And if you're not comfortable with Zoom, I have a couple of other avenues.
Thank you so much for coming on today. You are lovely. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
It's really been wonderful, Julie. Thank you for having me. I'm just sending lots of love to you and to all your listeners.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to The Joy Factor. For more information, visit www.thejoyfactorpodcast.com.